Welcome to the Savvy Sauce, where we have practical chats for intentional living. I'm your host, Laura Duggar, and I'm so glad you're here. The principles of honesty and integrity that Sam Lehman founded his business on continue today over 55 years later at Sam Lehman Chevrolet in Eureka. Owned and operated by the Birchie family, Sam Lehman's in Eureka appreciates the support they've received from their customers all over Central Illinois and beyond. Visit them today at lehmangm.com. Amber O'Neal Johnston is my fascinating guest for today. She's an author and speaker and coach, and she's just chosen to live a very wise life as a wife and mother. And I think you're going to enjoy gleaning practical tips, such as the benefits of getting our children out in nature, regardless of their age. She has teens and makes this super practical for things that they would enjoy too. And she shares these incredible benefits of what happens when we simply step outdoors. She's also going to share approachable ways to introduce our family to great art and other cultures. And she gives us a fabulous book list. So make sure you stay tuned through the end of the episode so that you can see some of the top books that she recommends. Finally, if you don't have a copy of her own latest release entitled Soul School, I highly recommend you purchase that today. Here's our chat. Welcome to the Savvy Sauce, Amber.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'd love for you just to start us off and introduce us to your family. And will you just share a glimpse of your values and lifestyle?
Absolutely. So I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia with my husband, Scott, and our 4 children. We are just entering birthday season, but shortly they will be 16, 14, 12, and 10. The girls are the 2 oldest. The boys are the 2 youngest. And they've been homeschooled from the beginning. So we're a homeschooling family. I'm originally from Illinois. My husband's originally from Ohio, but we met here in Atlanta at the High Museum of Art, which is really special. We are art loving, fine arts loving, liberal arts loving family. And so the idea that we met at the museum, I will just cherish that forever. Before homeschooling, I was a stay-at-home mom. And prior to having children, I have an MBA and I worked in corporate America in like marketing and advertising. And Scott comes from a similar background with the MBA and he was doing work in that area too. So we had that as a connection point. But I have always stayed home with the kids and, our values are rooted in our Christian faith. And we're an African-American family. And so we have values and cultural aspects that enter our home through that avenue as well. We are world travelers. So we enjoy that as part of who we are. And I'm an author and a speaker and just a very happy homeschooler.
I love that. And it sounds like such a rich and abundant life. And there's 2 little connections that I have to go back to. My husband and I had a date at that same museum. I love that you met your husband there.
Oh, wow. That's wild.
And so we had met when we were in Atlanta, but live in Illinois now. So which part of Illinois were you originally from?
I'm from Elgin, Illinois. It's out past O'Hare Airport. And I was born and raised there. My parents were both public school principals there. My dad was principal of Elgin High. And there's actually an elementary school, Ron O'Neal Elementary School in Elgin, named after my father. So that is where I'm from.
Wow. Okay. So then even with that piece, your father being a principal, and then you said you've homeschooled since the beginning. Did you always anticipate you would homeschool, or what was your journey into that?
Oh my gosh, never. And it's both of my parents were principals. So that's while my grandfather was an elected school board official, my sister was an elected school board official. So public school is just, in my blood from the very beginning. And that's what I assumed I would do for my kids at first. Once Scott and I got married and we had discussed it, we decided that I would stay home when they were little. And when they were old enough to go to school, I would go back to work and my salary would pay for private Christian school tuition. And as the years, the months really came to fruition for my oldest, my husband started backpedaling and he started talking this crazy talk about homeschooling. I'm like, that's a switcheroo for you. What are you talking about? I was like, that's weird. I don't want to do that. I don't feel called to do that. That does not seem like a comfortable space for me. I don't want my kids to endure that. Ultimately, I lacked confidence in that. I couldn't even articulate it. It felt scary, terrifying. Why would I take something so weighty into my own hands? And Scott was very persistent. And I can't even explain why he was so persistent about it, but I think to me, I feel like it was planted in him by the Lord, and he was like, felt that this was the way he wanted to lead his family. And he did it so graciously because I was very resistant. He asked, would you please try it for 1 year? And if you are unhappy, you don't think it's right, I'll never ask you about it again. And that gave me a softer place to land where I felt like it wasn't signing up for a long-term commitment because I knew I was going to hate it. And I said, sure, I will do that. And oh my gosh, it was the most amazing year. And I laugh now because my daughter was 4. So she's like 4 and turned 5 during that year. And so she was so young and people were like, well, what were you really doing? But I took it so seriously. I was doing all the things and I joined a homeschool support group and I was reading about it. And I realized, on Friday, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And on Monday, I took on this identity of a homeschooling mom. And it's just been a beautiful journey for us. I'm so thankful that the Lord led Scott in that way. He knew what was right, not just for our children, but for me too, when I had no vision for it. And so I'm just, very grateful.
I love that story. That's such an encouragement. And okay, your oldest is turning 16. So when you look back, what would you say has helped shaped your children's character the most?
hmm Well, I think the time that we've all had to spend together, like intense amounts of time. So not just quality time or quantity time, but both. And I think that there's nothing else I could have done that could replace that. So I think that's one of the things. I think my own acceptance of the divine nature of me being their mother and those being my children, and really that leading me to embrace my mother's intuition, which is something that I was hesitant for at first because there's so many experts and surely they know so much more than me. And that's not to say that that's not important. I read so widely. I'm always reading expert ideas and views. But what I realized is that those things can help me as tools. They can mentor me, but they can't master me because the master, right, has already appointed me as the perfect mom for these children, and nobody knows them, the little tiny details of them that nobody knows more than me. And so when I leaned into that and I'm like, yeah, says this online, this book said that, this thing says that, I can take what I can from those, but ultimately I feel the spirit telling me and leading me in this way with these children. And when I really leaned into that, like I have a right to do that, right? Like I am their mother. That revolutionized things. And I think that's what's helped shape my children's character the most is my willingness to lean into how I'm led to lead them.
Mm.
And so that's been a motherhood journey for me. And I hope that it's a legacy that I leave with my children.
And do you have any specific stories that come to mind that were examples of that mother's intuition? Something that really, I think it is such a gift from the Lord and that the Holy Spirit speaks to us in some unique way as mothers to be in tune with our kids. So is there a time that it really benefited them when you exercised your mother's intuition?
Well, there was one time with my son, my oldest son, his name is Beckett, and he was in the high chair eating while I was braiding my daughter's hair. And I heard him start making like these really weird noises. And I looked over and it was like he was choking and gagging. And I run over and but he seemed fine, but then he would do it again and he started sweating. And, today I really would say, "So you should call 911," but I didn't. I threw all the kids in the car and I rushed to the ER. And when we got there, he wasn't choking anymore. He wasn't sweating. They did his vitals and everything. And they said, "Well, mom, whatever happened passed. He's fine. And you guys can go home." And I was like, "No, he's not fine. I'm looking at him. He's not my little boy. His vitals are checking out, but he's not looking at me the way he normally looks at me. He's not interacting with me. The little funny things that I can make him smile all the time, he's not responding to them." And so, like, I know you have your tests, but like I'm telling you something's wrong with my little boy. So they had the doctor, he comes in to tell me everything's fine and he's sending me home. And so I was like, "Well, I'm not leaving. I'll just spend the night in the ER then with all my kids because I know something's wrong." And the doctor, who's this older man, he turns to me, he looks me in my eyes and he says, "In all my years of medical training, there's something that they never told us, but something I've learned throughout my career. Never doubt a mother's intuition." And he said, "We'll take him and run more tests." And they took Beckett back to run more tests. And they came back and said, "You were right. He has swallowed a coin and it's like just teetering on the precipice. And so at times it was blocking his airway. And at times it was shifted a little bit. And we have to go in immediately and get it." And that could have choked him if you had just gone home and put him down to bed. And so in that story, I took away two things. One, that I am his mother. And I don't care what the test says or what the data says or what the news or book. At the end of the day, I knew that something was wrong with my boy. The other thing is the graciousness of that doctor to see my humanity and my personhood beyond just the insurance payment or protocol or whatever. It let me know that like there's something powerful about letting other people know that you see them and that you are connected to them as another part of God's creation. Like he respected me on that level. So
That is incredible. I'm so grateful that that story has a happy ending and that you were assertive to say that. I think sometimes as women, probably especially as Christian women, we can think, "Oh, I want to be nice or not push back on somebody." But I love that you were assertive. It was what was in your child's best interest. And like you highlighted, that doctor's humility is admirable.
mhm.
But Amber, you mentioned too that you're a writer and you contribute a lot to things like the Wild and Free bundles. And I was always struck by the way that you would be out in nature. And there's so much to learn. So if you had to boil it down, what wisdom would you have to share from what you've learned about the importance of getting our kids and ourselves outdoors into nature?
Yeah, that's so funny. I love that you asked me that because I like to tell people I was raised in the air conditioning. And so there is no one who began motherhood further away from nature and being outdoors than me. And I can look back at those early days of like, I knew you could take your kids to the playground and I did do that. But like, what else would you do outside? And people would be like, "Oh, we went hiking on this trail." And I was like, where did you get on it? Like, where do you find a trailhead? Like, I mean, this is back, like, this is where I was coming from. And I was just like, and then what would we do? Like, we just walk and do we talk about trees? I don't know any trees. I know Christmas trees are evergreens, So it was just like coming from this very like foundational place where I didn't know anything, but I believed, right? I somehow inherently believed when I read that being outdoors was important for children. So I'm reading Charlotte Mason's work, and she's talking about nature study. I'm reading Last Child in the Woods by Aloud, and I'm hearing about this, he calls it a nature deficit disorder. And I'm reading all of these different kind of people who really respected childhood and personhood and really wanted the best for children. I'm reading a Christian perspective of the joy in connecting with God's creation, first and foremost, but also this idea of encouraging natural and authentic physical activity, running, climbing, balancing, exploring, developing coordination and confidence, and the mental health components, reducing stress and improving mood. And not just for the kids, but my friend Jenny Urich from 1,000 Hours Outside, she talks about how the first time she like took her kids out for the whole day, it was for her, because she was going crazy with all these little kids in the house, and the bags and the diaper bag and the snacks, and she didn't know what else to do. So she just went outside, and how healing that was and therapeutic that was for all of them. The idea of curiosity, of fueling curiosity and creativity. I've never seen my kids come up with they come up with imaginative things in our house, but outside, oh my goodness, the things they come up with, the things they create and make, and the storytelling that comes out of that. And I think the family bonds, our experiences, it's another way of memory making. I mean, we make memories when we go see plays and musicals and travel as well. So it's not the only way, but it's a strong way of that shared outdoor adventures. So like a couple weeks ago, we were all whitewater rafting. It's funny, like a lot of funny things happen when you're out there doing crazy stuff. And so we have a lot of laughter, and we have a lot of inside jokes that come from our time together. So I think that all of those, it's not just one thing. It's one of those rare things where there are all the pros and there really are no cons. And so I intentionally embrace that for my family, even though it's everything that I didn't have growing up.
Mm, wow, that is so interesting. I love how books have really inspired you to make changes that have benefited your entire family. And I'm thinking back years ago when I was in grad school studying marriage and family therapy, there was this book that we read, Letters to a Young Therapist. I believe the author is Mary Pfeiffer. And she said something that I found to be very true in my life. She said, from childhood, when we all look back, our memories typically boil down to three categories. One is family dinners around the table. The second is traveling with our family. And the third is any time we were outdoors. And so I'm wondering, that legacy that you're giving your kids, they're going to have an abundance of memories in all three of those buckets.
Yeah, I love that. And I had never read that. It's making me want to go and read her work, but I can't agree more. I mean, that's what I've seen anecdotally, at least in my family. And it's definitely been the case for us. I can totally see that. The other thing I love about outdoors too is it's free.
Mm.
So we've had times of plenty and times of not quite enough financially throughout our journey, due to layoffs and, recessions and all these different things. But that has been one thing, that the travel hasn't always been as consistent as we wanted, but the nature, the time outside has always been accessible. Even during COVID, that was accessible to us. So I love it for that too. But yeah, that's really cool.
Absolutely. Okay, so you were getting some inspiration from different books and speakers, but then when did you actually implement this? Do you remember how old your kids were?
Right away. So my oldest was like 4 or 5 years old when we started going outside. Now, again, we had always been going to the park. So they had been spending a lot of time outside, but I will say like that's like a very, man-made structures and, I can't think of it, like very cultivated space. So we weren't spending time in uncultivated space until around there. So maybe a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and an infant. And I know they started growing up in that way, and I had kids in an ergo on the back. And I remember hiking with a kid in an ergo on the front and then snapped another one on the back. And, these are memories I have of being outdoors thoroughly by the time the boys were coming along. And I even remember this story where we were at a creek and I looked up for a moment and just sheer panic that my little boy was gone. He wasn't in my eyesight anymore. The girls were playing there. And I'm like, and I look and look and look and there's nothing and no one, and all I can think is he's in the water, and I wasn't paying attention, and my heart's racing, and I'm like, girls, where's your brother? And my daughter says, Mommy, he's sleeping on your back. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just think like I was so tired during those years. And I just remember I would just think, let's just go outside. And some days that's just the most I could come up with. But yeah, I was freaking out and the little boy was sleeping on my back.
And now a brief message from our sponsor. Sam Lehman Chevrolet in Eureka has been owned and operated by the Birchie family for over 25 years. A lot has changed in the car business since Sam and Steven's grandfather, Sam Lehman, opened his first Chevrolet dealership over 55 years ago. If you visit their dealership today, though, you'll find that not everything has changed. They still operate their dealership like their grandfather did, with honesty and integrity. Sam and Steven understand that you have many different choices in where you buy or service your vehicle. This is why they do everything they can to make the car buying process as easy and hassle-free as possible. They are thankful for the many lasting friendships that began with a simple, "Welcome to Sam Lehman's." Their customers keep coming back because they experience something different. I've known Sam and Steven and their wives my entire life, and I can vouch for their character and integrity, which makes it easy to highly recommend you check them out today. Your car buying process doesn't have to be something you dread, so come see for yourself at Sam Lehman Chevrolet in Eureka. Sam and Steven would love to see you, and they appreciate your business. Learn more at their website, LehmanEureka.com, or visit them on Facebook by searching for Sam Lehman Eureka. You can also call them at 309-467-2351. Thanks for your sponsorship. I'm wondering too, so when you began, what did you start with? What did you do outside?
So we started with walking, and I also was very verbal about what I felt were my inadequacies with friends. And that's where, I can't overemphasize I haven't brought that up yet, but the idea of community. You don't need 100 friends, just a few people who either are doing the same thing as you, have done it, or know you personally so well. But I had a friend who was like this outdoor enthusiast, and I always admired her for that. And she'd be like, "Hey, I went to the hydrangeas are coming out today, and they're going to bloom for 4 days." And and she would be like, "Oh, do you want some wild blueberries?" And I'd be looking at her with side eye, like, "Girl, I only eat blueberries from Publix, because how do I know that you know what you're doing? Those could be poisonous berries you identified wrong." So we had this kind of ongoing thing. And I just asked her, I was like, "Hey, could we go outside with you guys sometimes?" And she was like, "Of course." So our first hike was with her and her kids. And she showed me how to go outside and do nothing. Like, we didn't do anything. We just walked. And the kids let us, they would stop and ponder things and ask questions, which she knew the answers to, but wouldn't answer. So she was like, "Well, what do you think?" Or, "That's something cool we can investigate," or whatever. So I realized, wow, here's this expert naturalist who's not even using her expertise. I don't have any expertise, so I could do the same thing. Well, what do you think about that? So the kids led us. We stopped when they stopped. We kept going when they kept going. We had plenty of water and snacks, which she had told me, which was important. And that was my first thing. It was a hike. And after that, I only went back to that place by myself with my kids without her, because that was the only trail I knew. I knew where to park and where to go, and I felt confident. And then lo and behold, I run into Charlotte Mason's work where she talks about returning to the same place throughout the year and having your kids compare what's happening there season to season. And so different rationale for why I was doing that. But then I was like, look, there's beauty even in the simplicity of me not knowing what else to do. So that's kind of how we got into it. And then I started having more experience and going out and being more adventurous, further away from home with my kids.
Okay, so then what other ways has it evolved? You mentioned whitewater rafting. So you've got teens now. What
Mhm.
does your time outdoors look like in this phase?
So lots of camping. So, Memorial Day weekend, we were camping in yurts with friends. This past weekend, we camped. We had a big Juneteenth celebration, and then we went camping for Juneteenth weekend. And so I would say that uh, kayaking, paddle boards. We have paddle boards we take out. Fishing. I hate fishing personally, don't like it at all, but two of my kids enjoy fishing, so I'm there for that. I'll just bring a book or whatever because it's quite boring to me, but they love it. So we moved. I mean, how much of a commitment is that? We moved to a different house when we were able to have our whole property is forest floor. So it's completely shaded and intertwined with trees and plants and a kind of wildscape. And across the road is a lake where the boys can fish and I can call their name for lunch and they can hear me. Now, I have to yell it loud. It's kind of country. Other people are probably like, what is going on? I'm like, boys, but they can hear me right there. And so the creek and just really everything. Uh, a lot of hiking, I will say. We live near a mountain and we're in Georgia, so the North Georgia mountains are not far from us. We have Appalachia or Appalachia, as my friend said, I mispronounce it. Um, and yeah, there's nothing that isn't my one of my first dates with Scott was whitewater rafting. So we've always kind of embraced that.
Oh, that's a special way to tie in a married couple memory with your kids and get to pass that along. And
Yeah.
water and mountains, those things are, they never get old. But I've heard others even say, like, you don't have to take stuff other than water and snacks, like you mentioned, to go outside. But I like the practical tips that sometimes people take art supplies and they can nature journal or a book to read aloud. Do you have any other practical tips like that you would encourage if somebody wants to get started with this lifestyle?
Yeah, I would say we okay, the best thing I can say is to just try it. Like I think that oftentimes I know I'm like this. You want to try to be an expert at something before you actually put it into practice. And the point is like we're looking at someone's work or something that they're doing after years that they've been in practice. And then we're expecting to do that from the very beginning. And until we get there, we don't want to do it. So for example, nature study, nature journaling. I always admired nature journaling, but when you look at people's nature journals that people who are willing to share, there's usually a reason they're willing to share theirs because it looks beautiful. And mine did not look beautiful. But I was still willing to give it a try. And I love that. And I love my kids, what they've worked on. And I cherish all of our early beginning sketches. And quite honestly, I'm still not great, but I think having tools like watercolor pens and water pens where we can do watercolor on the go. And we've done many pictures out by the side of the creek on picnic blankets, especially like my older children, while younger people are like, what do I do with these little ones? Like water, like they love that splashing, making sandcastles and things while I'm painting or doing things watercolors with the older ones. And were they museum worthy? No, but there was a lot of enjoyment involved and a skill based learning. So I think asking questions and inquiry, using pictures, sure, and painting, but also keeping track of things. The date that our cherry blossoms bloom. And our white cherry blossom blooms before the pink one every year, and keeping track of that, or trying to map all of the vegetation in our yard. Like we are, know which trees, what they're called, where they come from. That takes time. And those are things we've done. That's not like we're only just sitting there like barefoot, grounding ourselves and forest bathing. We're out there learning as well. And I think that, both are beautiful ways to enter into them.
I love it. There's so many benefits. And you even do mention grounding. That helps so much going barefoot with inflammation and different body systems that are reset, even by getting out and getting early morning light and the serotonin that's produced that turns into melatonin at night. So we're happier in the day and sleepier at night. resetting systems in our eyes and like healing our body in different ways too. And even how much better outdoor air is for us than indoor air. The benefits just go on and on. So, would you have any to add that either your family has experienced personally or you've learned about just benefits of getting outdoors?
Yeah, I think that one, even, all the things you said, yes, and also the mental clarity. And that's why I don't like being time outdoors being tied to a negative consequence for academic related behavior. So the house across the road from ours, you could say ironically, or just be like, God chose to gift us. It's a homeschooling family. They moved in a couple years ago, and they have some of our kids are similar ages, and our boys are just outside all the time together, hours and hours and hours every single day. And I see the difference on days where the weather doesn't permit it, or where one family or the other, isn't available. There's a difference in terms of clarity and the work that's happening at the lesson table as well. And this came up, my nephew, they're not homeschooled, and his parents took him on a trip, which caused him to miss a day of school, and he missed an assignment that day. He didn't turn it in. And so the school then, when he got back to school, punished him by keeping him indoors for recess. And I was helping, my family craft a note that talked about two things. One, they punished a child for a decision the parents made. And that is grossly unfair. They should be talking to the parents about not missing school if that's the important thing. And the second thing is you took away the very thing that allows these children to have what they need to sit quietly and take in, that's not an appropriate consequence. So anyway, I feel that the mental clarity beyond the things I would have named, the same things you already said, it would be the only other thing that I would bring in, and why time outside actually helps us to achieve deeper and broader and more expansive learning when we are inside.
That's good. And I love how you keep mentioning the piece of community, that's the best way to do this. So, regardless if somebody homeschools or they don't, how can all of us actually prioritize this? And what's a good, healthy goal for getting started, even as specific as how much time how many outdoors, or how many days a week should we
Mhm.
be outdoors?
Yeah, it's so different for every family. I think that you should go just past the point of comfort, for most of us. So if the point of comfort for you is like 30 minutes a week, then you would start out to like aim for an hour a week, 20 minutes, 3 days. If you're already outside for, 10 hours, a couple hours each day, I would say maybe shake it up with what you're doing and see what would it be like to go on a really long outdoor excursion on a Saturday, or to take a day off or something like that. So I don't want to say like an exact number, because we're all entering in at a different place. For me, if someone had told me to spend 8 hours outside with my kids when I was first starting, and I'm used to going to the playground for 20 minutes, that would have been overwhelming. And I would have been like, there's no way, I'm never going to do it. So I think like just taking that, like, where do I feel most comfortable and how can I push myself just past that point, would be a great place to start, and kind of a nice place to always stay. Like, what's the next thing that we can do to lean further into this?
Oh, that's really good. Very wise counsel. And Amber, you've mentioned that your family loves to travel. So, will you share any adventures that you've had as a family with world schooling?
So our goal, and it's just a fun thing, I don't know if we'll totally do it, but I think we will. It's to have the children. So for us, world schooling is where we're not on vacation, but we're actually deeply immersed in a learning stance in another country, another part of the world. And we're trying to do that on every continent except Antarctica before my oldest graduates. So we have two continents left. We are going to be going to Asia in the fall. So we'll be taking that one off of our list and for that particular feat. And then her senior year, we'll do Australia and hop over to New Zealand. That's the plan. If it's God's will for us to do that, that's what we would like to do. And that will complete our journey. So, and then we'll keep traveling, but that was just kind of a fun thing to help lead us because there's so many places in the world to go. Like, how do you know? And so that kind of helped us know, well, let's do this continent. Let's do that continent. So we took our first trip. We spent 3 months in South America, most of it spent in Bolivia. And I can tell you exactly the kids' ages because my youngest turned 2 in Bolivia. So they were 2, 4, 6, and then one turned 8 there. And so that was, diapers. I had a baby in diapers, a little one in diapers, and still nursing when we went on our first trip. And I've never regretted that. People have said, why would you take kids so young? They're not going to remember. And I think a couple thoughts. One, you'd be surprised. They do remember. They may not remember this artifact in some museum, but that's not what we spend most of our time doing, but they remember the people. And we've kept in touch with a lot of the people that we've met in these different countries. And we've even had visitors in our home, staying in our basement apartment that we met abroad. So they do remember. They remember how things feel and taste more than they remember exact like historical markers and things like that. Also, I kind of compare it to like breastfeeding and nursing. Like my kids, except for one little boy who held on way too long, but they don't remember that. But I believed that it was something good for them that was forming. It was helping to form who they were, not so much who they were personality wise, but their bodies as they were growing. And so sometimes we do things that are foundational to our children's development, even if they don't have a conscious and direct memory of that thing. And that's how I see world travel. So we've been to Europe, and we were in Greece when COVID hit. We were in the middle of a big trip there. So we had the whole struggle to get back to the United States. We've been to West Africa, most spent in Ghana, England, France. We're going to Ethiopia this year. So yeah, that's our thing.
Wow. And those memories are incredible. Even let's say your children forget some of this, or if they're too young to remember all of it, you remember this and you get to share those stories with them and pass that along. I can't even imagine all of the learning that takes place from being immersed in those other cultures. But you also mentioned then welcoming people into your basement apartment. So you sound hospitable as a family. What does that actually look like? And I'm kind of going to throw two questions at you. What does that actually look like? And then both for world schooling and hospitality, what are tips for ways we can replicate that as well?
So one thing that's important to me to always share about world schooling, I have a whole chapter about our world schooling adventures in my first book, A Place to Belong. But one important thing that I call out there is Eli Gerson. He's the guy who came up with the word world schooling. And he says, we don't even need a passport to do it. That world schooling is really learning from the world around you. It could be your local library. It could be the internet. It could be your neighbors. And so while I use this more global term of world schooling, because that's just what we call it in our family, the truth of the matter is it's a way of seeing the world and seeing all the opportunity to make connections right where you're sitting. And, people like, oh, you guys have so much money. I can't do that. First of all, we don't have so much money. Like, for instance, we have one car. Right. So there are sacrifices that we make that other people may choose to spend their money in a different way. So we definitely don't have a ton of money. But more importantly, I'm thinking, yeah, you're saying that you don't have money, but how much have you explored your county? Like, what do you know about the history of your county? And have you been to your local historical society? And have you really, gotten in? Have you been to the oldest cemetery within driving distance of your home? Have you gotten a tour of it to hear the stories of who's there? Like, you can have that same inquiry and curiosity without ever leaving. So I'll say that first. And in terms of the hospitality part, it's like it's an intention, right? You have to like decide that you're going to do that because it's so much easier not to have people. First, you got like, oh, my house is not clean and blah, blah, blah. And people don't just stop by the way they used to stop by. Like my grandparents' house, it was so fun staying there in the summer because folks just came in and out all day. Just they come calling is what they called it. They come calling. And even when we read Jane Austen, people leaving a calling card, when they came to visit and you weren't there. Like there was this idea that you didn't have to have an appointment. And now you do. You have to let someone know before they're coming. So it's a choice to be vulnerable if you want to be hospitable in that way, that people will see your, dirty bones of your house, and, that you're not always presenting this like really sanitized version of your family and your family life. And so I think that's intentional decision to say it's more important to us to be with other people and let them in than it is for us to always sanitize everything before they get here. And I don't mean sanitize as in clean the house, that too, but I mean sanitize as in everyone's behaving the way that I want them to behave in front of people and all of that as well.
When was the first time you listened to an episode of The Savvy Sauce? How did you hear about our podcast? Did a friend share it with you? Will you be willing to be that friend now and text 5 other friends or post on your socials anything about The Savvy Sauce that you love? If you share your favorite episodes, that is how we continue to expand our reach and get the good news of Jesus Christ in more ears across the world. So we need your help. Another way to help us grow is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Each of these suggestions will cost you less than a minute, but it will be a great benefit to us. Thank you so much for being willing to be generous with your time and share. We appreciate you. Well, and I think it is a biblical command for all of us, and it does bless the person or the people that we are hosting, but there are also rewards for us in the process. So if you even just could think of one reward of a way that this hospitality has blessed your family, what would you say?
Well, I would say in John chapter 5, it says, this verse we've all heard, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So, when we talk about hospitality, we spend a lot of time talking about what my family is doing for other people. But also that means that my family is constantly in contact with other believers and other people who are helping us with our faith, to helping us to remain connected to Jesus. And without that connection, we know that there's nothing that we can do, nothing of any spiritual significance. So while I'm inviting those people into our lives, it also ensures that my family is not alone in what we're trying to do in our faith. So like that's one of a very easy benefit I can say right off the top.
Ooh, and that one is truly invaluable for our children to get to witness the way other people live out their faith, and it impacts each of us. But I'm also curious, how do you manage your time so that you can be a content creator and you can homeschool and travel and cultivate these relationships?
Mhm. So first, let me say that it's not always easy. And there are seasons where I feel like I'm doing a really good job with that. And there are seasons where I feel like I'm not doing a good job. I always prioritize my family first. And so during the seasons where I feel like I'm not doing a good job, it's very public. People can see I did not post on Instagram for a month, or I'm not speaking as much. They're finding it harder to find opportunities to hear me speak, or I have a long lull before books are published. Those are times where I've turned inward towards my family, where I felt like I didn't have the bandwidth for everything. And so that's something I have to deal with on a constant basis, because I know that my business or my ministry is not as rich and robust as it could be. I have ideas for days. I have ideas and the ability to bring them to fruition, but I'm not willing to sacrifice the time that it takes to do those things in this season. Because even though I don't have little kids, I definitely have more time than I did when I had little kids. It's not even just time, it's more mind clarity as well. But I don't have as much time as people with little kids would think, because I am wanting to be fully present, even for my teens. When they want to talk to me, I want to be talkable to. I want to be available to them. And we're going places, we're doing things. They're busy, I'm busy. And I'm trying to prepare them for young adulthood. And that's just as time consuming as trying to prepare my young children for their next stage of their development. So I guess it's so messy. Oh my gosh, it's messy. It's chaotic. It's a little bit crazy. But in the center of it all, I really appreciate the opportunities I do have to do the things that help me refuel. So I'm a writer. So writing isn't just about creating a book. It's that I get to create a book, but really it's about the process and how cathartic it is for me to sit in silence and wonder about things and be able to write them out. And oh, lo and behold, there's a publisher who is interested in publishing those things. But the real work for me is in the process of writing. Then when I come home from a coffee shop or I emerge from my room, I come back more enthusiastic about what it is we're working on and what we're doing. The other thing that I would share is that I don't do all of that stuff by myself. So things that people don't, just like I say, I have one car and we travel the world. People are like, oh, okay, this is not what I thought. My husband does all the laundry. Every piece of laundry in this house that the teens are not doing, they do their own, but all the laundry that's done, he does and has done for over a decade. So that's a thing I have to say, because you might be picturing that I'm doing all of those things. Or when I wrote one of my books, I was struggling and Scott was like, how can I help you? And he was like, what if we get help to come in with the kids and like a nanny or something a few hours a week? I'm like, no, that's the last thing I want somebody to touch. So he's like, well, what is it? So we hired a chef and she would prepare all of our dinners according to like how I like my family to eat, and lots of whole foods and good things. And she would drop them off at our house. It was very expensive, but I used part of the money from the advance from the publisher to pay for that so that I could write the book. So I think those are things that a lot of times people don't talk about, but I have supports in place. I'm not Superwoman any more than anyone else.
Oh, I appreciate that real picture and those creative ideas, because as mothers, we don't just make goals for ourselves. Like you said, we have these dreams and ideas that we could put into practice, but we consider our relationships as well and how it will impact everyone. So I love hearing practically how that plays out for you and the trade-offs that you've chosen to make. And I know that you and I also share a passion for reading aloud. So if we could get really practical for a moment, what are some of your most recommended read alouds for families from a variety of age groups?
Well, I'm always ready for that question, but I have to say it's almost like asking me like which of my children are my favorite. It's so hard in so many ways, but for younger, elementary, I picked 3 books that I think kind of help show how expansive I feel like I want my children's reading life to be. So this book is called Indigo Dreaming, and it's a book about 2 girls. One's in North America, and another one we can believe is off the coast of Africa. And they're both doing what they do in their own homes. And it's beautifully illustrated also, but they're both doing what they do in their own homes while wondering, is there another little girl in this world doing what I do, liking what I like? Well, indeed there is. And it's poetic and it has soft paintings. It's just stunning. And then another one is called The Magic Doll. It's a children's book inspired by African art. And in this book, the mother desperately wants to have a child, but she's dealing with infertility. And she turns to the use of an infertility doll. And what would I say about that? My family doesn't believe in that, but it's a book that I read with my children because we were going to visit this culture. And I wanted to explain to them how we can respect something and learn about it even without adopting it. And that you can understand the yearning of a mother's heart to hold a child in her hand and the desperation that could bring about. And I wanted them to know that we would see fertility dolls there and what they meant and things like that. And it's also beautifully illustrated, which is important to me. And then this one's just a fun book. It's called I Had a Favorite Dress, but as the dress starts getting too small, she cuts it and turns it into a skirt. And then it gets turned into this. And then the little small piece gets turned into some socks. And then it's just a little scarf and snip, snip, sew, pretty hair bow, And so this same piece of fabric, this favorite dress she had, every time she, can't use it in that way anymore, it gets moved and shifted into something else. And this book reminds me to just, sometimes we share heavier topics with our children, even beautiful topics, but sometimes it's just joy. Like that's the whole purpose of the book, is to smile and have fun. And I'll move more quickly. For the older elementary books, I have this book, Schomburg. It's a nonfiction book about Arturo Schomburg and the man who built a library, which is now housed, his home library is now housed as part of the collection of the public library system in New York. And he collected books about all types of Black and Brown people. And it was considered one of the foremost library collections. So as a book lover, I love that story. This one's called Heart and Soul. It's the story of America and African Americans with stunning illustrations by Kadir Nelson. So I love visual art. I always say my family, we can't afford to buy the most exquisite art for our walls, but we have an exquisite art collection through our picture books that I've collected. And then the last one for that group is John Henry by Julius Lester and Jerry Pinkney illustrations. So those are two powerhouses of African-American author and illustrator. Both have passed. And it is the tall tale of John Henry told in a way that you've never seen before. For older kids, like middle schoolers, I love this One Big Open Sky because it's about some Black exodusters who are moving west. And it goes so well for families who love Little House on the Prairie. But, Little House on the Prairie, in some ways, there's some instances that are a little disrespectful to Native Americans and Black people. And this is like a redemptive story, not instead of, but alongside of it, to say that there were Black people that were also moving westward and what was their journey. And it's written in verse. Like, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you enough about that. This book, The Angel Orphan, my friend Leah Bowden wrote this book, and it's the story of Charlotte Mason. So in chapter book form. So there's also a picture book that someone wrote, but this is a beautiful story about Charlotte Mason. And my family's all-time favorite, my kids read aloud, is the Wing Feather Saga by Andrew Peterson. And that whole series, oh my goodness, that cemented so much of our family lexicon because it's filled with like made up words. And we have jokes and talks and sayings for days coming out of that series. For our older teenagers, or even early middle school and early teenage years, The Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is just like such a classic. Mildred D. Taylor that many of us read, but she also wrote a young adult version where Cassie is entering young adulthood. So different age audiences, but same author. And a lot of people haven't heard of the other book, All the Days Past, All the Days to Come. So for high school, I love that. And then I threw a couple things in for mama. An epic story called Homegoing about two sisters and the different paths their lives take during a time. Part of it's told in Africa and part of it's told in the United States. And the last book I have is this memoir, A Black Mother's Garden. It's called Soil. And she uses her actual real garden at her home to kind of give us this idea of life. And it's hard to explain, but it's part memoir, part gardening, like learning and talking about the plants, but also how all of that can turn into kind of like the soil of your life and the people being plants. And she really focuses on wildflowers. So it's a stunningly like poignant and beautiful memoir. So those are my favorite, and now if you ask me tomorrow, you're going to get a different stack.
I love it. What a gift to get to see all of those. You and I share some of those favorites, and you've introduced me to some new ones. So I'm very grateful and hope everybody listening feels the same. But speaking of books, you've authored more than one, but will you tell us about your most recent release entitled Soul School?
Yeah, so Soul School is it's Soul School taking kids on a joy-filled journey through the heart of Black American culture. And I know it's so hard with those. But it is a book of books. So people who have enjoyed Honey for a Child's Heart or Read Aloud Family, um, those types of books, which I have adored, and I have all of them, and I've highlighted them, or Give Your Child the World is another one. I've highlighted them and dog-eared them, and I've used them to check out books from the library for my children for many, many years. And at the same time, it was always very, on my heart that the books that I spend a lot of time reading with my children that I choose and I select are never really included in most of those books. And there was this season, I'm like, I'm frustrated, I'm mad. I'm like, why aren't they putting these books in here? And then the more I thought about it, I was like, the most you can ask for a mother to do when she's sharing these books when it's coming from that is what she read with her children. So am I going to be mad at her that she didn't read what I think she should read? No. Do I wish that it had been more expansive? Sure, I do. But how many of us wouldn't go back and do something differently if knowing what we know today or whatever? So I wrote a companion like that I see, not to replace those books, but this book is filled with African American and Black diasporic children's literature, starting from preschool all the way through high school. The first part of the book, I talk about what I'm looking for specifically in books about Black American culture, and why those things are important. So the first 5 chapters are really teaching the teacher. And then the rest of the book, which makes up most of the book, are really rich annotated book lists with descriptions, why I chose the book, discussion questions, project ideas, and something called second helpings. Like when you think of a big soul food dinner, you go through the line the first time and you fill your plate, but then you go back for second helpings of the things that taste the very best. So if your child likes this book, then here are 2 second helpings that they also would probably enjoy. The book was years in the making. I read all 300 plus books in there, from cover to cover. And that's kind of my contribution to raising our children.
Wow. I mean, it is a stunning piece of work, and there's so much for your family, but also for all of us. So I think of being one of your kids, what a treasure that their mom read 300 books and put this together. But for all of us, I love books on books. And like you said, we can use it to go to the library, or then once we read those and find which other ones we love, we can add it to our home collection. So thank you for that powerhouse of a work. And Amber, there's still so much more that you could share with us. Where can we go after this conversation to connect with you or to learn more?
You can go to heritagemom.com, and there you'll find all of my books and years worth of blog posts and book recommendations and other things. My Instagram is at heritagemomblog, and the same at Facebook.
Wonderful. Okay, we will add those links in the show notes for today's episode. And you may be familiar that we're called the Savvy Sauce because savvy is synonymous with practical knowledge. And so as my final question for you today, Amber, what is your savvy sauce?
Oh, this is such a great question. I love this part of your podcast. I would say that my savvy sauce is learning to be a really great listener. Like if there's nothing else, then that's listening to my husband and the things of his heart, and listening to my children and my neighbors and my friends, but also people I don't know, people in other places, and also people I disagree with, and being willing to be quiet and listen and take what I can from what they're sharing as well. So that is, I think my savvy sauce is being an introspective listener.
Ooh, that is well said. You are such an inspiring and creative soul, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this chat. And I know I've been hearing you speak on other podcasts and reading your work for years. So this was such a treat to get to connect with you today. And I just want to say thank you for being my guest.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
One more thing before you go. Have you heard the term gospel before? It simply means good news, and I want to share the best news with you. but it starts with the bad news. Every single one of us were born sinners, but Christ desires to rescue us from our sin, which is something we cannot do for ourselves. This means there is absolutely no chance we can make it to heaven on our own. So for you and for me, it means we deserve death and we can never pay back the sacrifice we owe to be saved. We need a Savior. But God loved us so much, He made a way for His only Son to willingly die in our place as the perfect substitute. This gives us hope of life forever in right relationship with Him. That is good news. Jesus lived the perfect life we could never live and died in our place for our sin. This was God's plan to make a way to reconcile with us so that God can look at us and see Jesus. We can be covered and justified through the work Jesus finished if we choose to receive what He has done for us. Romans 10:9 says that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. So would you pray with me now? Heavenly Father, thank you for sending Jesus to take our place. I pray someone today, right now, is touched and chooses to turn their life over to you. Will you clearly guide them and help them take their next step in faith to declare you as Lord of their life? We trust you to work and change lives now for eternity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, you are declaring Him for me, so me for Him. You get the opportunity to live your life for Him. And at this podcast, we're called The Savvy Sauce for a reason. We want to give you practical tools to implement the knowledge you have learned. So you ready to get started? First, tell someone. Say it out loud. Get a Bible. The first day I made this decision, my parents took me to Barnes & Noble and let me choose my own Bible. I selected the Quest NIV Bible and I love it. You can start by reading the book of John. Also, get connected locally, which just means tell someone who's a part of a church in your community that you made a decision to follow Christ. I'm assuming they will be thrilled to talk with you about further steps, such as going to church and getting connected to other believers to encourage you. We want to celebrate with you too, so feel free to leave a comment for us here if you did make a decision to follow Christ. We also have show notes included where you can read scripture that describes this process. And finally, be encouraged. Luke 15:10 says, "In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." The heavens are praising with you for your decision today. And if you've already received this good news, I pray you have someone to share it with. You are loved, and I look forward to meeting you here next time.